Kramer Long, I've asked one of your questions before, and here comes another one that you brought up that actually is foundational to an awful lot of what we're doing in these videos, this series. So let me throw out your question and then try to answer as best I can. The only thing you say I am often not sure of is how to share with Muslims. Theologically or historically, it falls apart. True, they both fall apart. Which way to go is what I struggle with. Lately, it's been historical. And I love that. Lately, and I think mainly because you're watching our channels, Sneakers Corners and mine and Hatuns and Al-Fadi's. We're the ones who are really taking on the historical critique. And I think it's good that you're asking which is the better. I'm not going to say which is the better. People, and in some ways, from what we just said in the last video, David Wood and Sam Shamoun are the best when it comes to theological confrontation. They're doing an amazing job of just destroying Islam theologically. Historically, that's our area of expertise. That's my area of expertise specifically because that's the area I did my doctoral thesis in. And it's also the man who really I followed, Dr. Carl Fander, the man who gave me the name Fander for Fander Films and for Fander Institute of Apologetics, who was living in the 1800s, this German scholar who could read and speak 7 different languages and spent his whole career studying the historical critique. That's what he did. He was the first actually that I'm aware of. And way back in 1829, he was the one that actually went into the historical critique and actually asked the question that we all are asking today. And he basically, can we trust the story about Muhammad? And can we trust the story about the Quran, how it was put together? And he went right to Ibn Hisham and Al-Waqidi, and he went right to Ibn Ishaq, and he went to Al-Bukhari, and he actually read them in Arabic. He speaks and read and write Arabic, and then he translated them into German and into English. And he did his research in the early 1800s. There were no computers back then. There was no internet. He had to do it all by taking the books and translating them himself. And so he paved the way for the rest of us to then continue with this historical critique. And that's why he said, way back then, we're talking about over almost 200 years ago, he said, we can't trust these traditions. We can't trust the Sirah or the Hadith or the Tafsir or the Tahriq because it's written much, much too late. I wasn't the one that came up with that. He came up with that. And that's why I love referring to him and using his material. But as to your question, which is better to use? Well, I'm a convert of the historical critique, and I'll tell you why, for a number of reasons. One of the first is that the historical critique is the most neutral of critiques. It's the most neutral of critiques in that it doesn't take a bias. There's not a bias either way, because all you're looking for, if you do it properly, is you're looking for the empirical evidence. That's all you're doing. You're looking for the empirical evidence concerning, in this case, what we're doing right now, and the series that we're going through right now is looking for whether Islam existed in the 7th century prior to 690. And that means that we're asking whether Muhammad is the Muhammad that we see in the traditions, or he's nothing more than the Muhammad of faith. Or did he even exist? We're getting asked that question. I believe he did. Whether or not the Quran existed that early, whether or not it was put together by Abu Bakr and then canonized by Uthman, whether or not there were people called Muslims or a religion called Islam, and whether or not Mecca existed that early. These are the questions we're asking in this series. And because I'm asking these questions, it's not as a Christian asking it. I could be anybody. I could be a secular person. In fact, the secular people are the ones who come and shake my hand the most. I remember when I left Speaker's Corner back 3 years ago, the last time I was down there in 2017, the last man to say goodbye to me was an atheist who was almost in tears when he heard that I was leaving. He says, please don't go, because you're the only Christian we've met that's asking the basic question that all of us are asking, and it's just 3 words. Is it true? That's all you're asking. Is it true? And you're using language that we can understand. You're using redacted criticism. You're using source criticism. You're using literary criticism. You're using historical criticisms. And I kind of reminded him, but all those were all created on the Bible. And that's why we are the best to do it, because we understand it the best. And I thanked him for saying that he enjoyed this kind of material. But then I turned to him and I said, yes, you may be the ones that benefit most from this because it's material that you can understand, because you're sick and tired of us telling what God has done for us. Yeah, that's our own testimony. For you, it's not what God has done for you. You're asking this very basic question, is it true? And you're asking this of all religions, not just of Islam. You're asking it of Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or even atheism. That's the question we have to ask of atheists and humanists. Is it true? And one of the best ways to do that is to use historical criticism, because in every case, Kramer, every religion has not every, but the major religions have a revelation. And the revelation for Islam is the Quran. For us, it's the Bible. For the Sikhs, it's the Granth Sahib. For the Buddhists, well, the Buddhists have it's difficult to know where they go to. The Hindus, it's the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads. All these revelations in these different religions make historical claims. They talk about men who do certain things at certain times, in certain places. Those are the 4 areas of historical criticism. Men who do certain things at certain times, in certain places. And so we need to investigate those men doing those things at that place and at that time. And that's exactly what has been done with the Bible. Now we're doing it with the Quran. We're doing it with Muhammad. And we're asking those 4 historical questions of every religion. But right now, my area of expertise is the Islam. So I've been doing it for 25 years. I'll continue to do it till I die. I've got gray hair, so I'm not going to be here that much longer. But it's important that I do that because it's, as I said, it's neutral. It is absolutely neutral. And that's why the atheists liked it. That's why the humanists like it. And I remember when he said that, he had tears in his eyes, and I turned to him and I said, no, please don't you use this. Because you as a humanist and you as an atheist, all you wanted to do is destroy those Muslims' faiths. And I don't want to destroy their faith. You know, they're some of the best people in the world. I absolutely love those Muslims. I find their passion attractive. I find their passion for God infectious. I don't want to destroy that faith for God. I don't want to destroy that faith in Revelation. I don't want to destroy that faith in the Quran unless I have something that's an alternative. Unless I have an antidote for it. You have nothing to give them. You're going to destroy their faith. You're going to destroy who they are, everything they believe, and you have nothing to replace it with. Atheism and humanism has nothing. We are the only ones that have something that can replace it. That's why I want to take them away from the Quran, and I want to bring them back from this book. I want to take them to this book. I want to take them away from the God behind this book, and I want to bring them back to the God behind this book. I want to take them away from the Isa of this book and bring them back to the Yeshua of this book. And we're the only ones that really know that. We're the only ones that have the antidote. We're the only ones that have the alternative. We are the only ones that have the answer. So the historical critique does just that, Kramer. Theologically speaking, you can do it as well. And that's why the David Woods and the Samson Moons and the Michael Browns are doing a great job at confronting it theologically. But the difficulty with theologically, you're starting from a Christian bias. You're assuming it's nothing more than a choice. It's nothing more than opinion. And it's one against the other. And you can do the whole, and what I love about David Wood and Samson Moon is they're looking at the theological implications of that, and they're looking at how irrelevant it is. And that's brilliant. The difficulty is it's not neutral. Being neutral means that we can step outside of our Christian bubble and still ask that same question and have all the right in the world to do so, because it's already been asked of the Bible, and it needs to be asked of the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita. It needs to be asked of all religious revelations that claim to be from God, as the Bible has already been asked and passed all those tests. And now it needs to be asked of Islam. And that's reasons why I think in the 21st century, the battle between Islam and Christianity or any religion will come down to, can they pass the historical test? Secondly, not only is it neutral, that's the first, but secondly, it's the one that we're finding are bringing more people to Jesus Christ, because we're finding Muslims all over the world. They're writing, they're emailing. We're finding them. I find them they're texting me. I meet them in airports. It's fascinating. Muslims come up to me and they have given up Islam because they finally realized that this book is written by men. They didn't know that before. they've been told that all their lives it was written that it was eternal, that it was always existed in heaven, that was sent down over a period of 22 years to a man named Muhammad. Now they don't even know whether Muhammad had anything to do with it. And what's more, they have found that it's been changed, manipulated, and created and deleted, and it's been corrupted, and finally was finalized in 1924, but that was only in one city. It was only finalized for the whole world in 1985, just 25 years ago. And so when they're hearing that, they suddenly realize this is not the book that we grew up with. And they look at the God behind this book, and they realize that the book doesn't stand, and of course everything in the book doesn't stand. And that means everything in the book about this man or this God named Allah is not the God for them. And of course, once they get to Muhammad, that's where the debate that we're hearing between Muhammad and Jesus, that's where Jesus comes out on top. But historically speaking, to invalidate the Quran invalidates everything else of which the Quran props up, because the Quran is the basis for everything else that comes after. The Quran is the foundation for Islam. And therefore, Muhammad is dependent on the Quran. Allah is dependent on the Quran. The Isa of the Quran is dependent on the Quran. In fact, everything we know about Islam, the 5 deens, are all dependent on the Quran. And that's why today you're finding more and more Muslims who have already given up the traditions. They don't want to support. They don't want to defend. You're finding Shabid Ali. He doesn't want to defend anymore the Hadith because he can't. It's not defendable because of people like David Wood and Samson Wood have destroyed the traditions. And so they've come back to what they call Quran only. They are now only Quran. And that's why I'm taking on the Quran, because this is the last foundation that needs to fall. Because once this goes, Muhammad goes. And with Muhammad and the Quran, Islam goes. Historically speaking, I think it will be the Achilles heel. It is the Achilles heel of Islam. That's why, Kramer, if you have a choice, stick with the historical critique. Why? Because it is neutral and it is foundational. And because once you destroy Islam foundationally, once you destroy its book, and once you destroy its man, the book of the man, the book of the man, there is no more Islam left. And you then have to come home. You have to come home to the only other book that has passed every one of those historical tests, this book. The only man that has passed every historical test, this man, Jesus Christ. Thirdly then, and I should end with that really, but thirdly I have one more point. And that is because of the fact that we're using the historical critique, and I'm not engaging that much in the theological critique, although I do that, and I'm not saying I don't, and I'm not, don't hold me to that. But because of the historical critique is such an enormously important critique, and because of the fact that it is probably the most devastating, because once you knock out the foundations, everything else comes crashing down. It is the one critique that you can't be sent to prison for. Because everything I'm saying comes from empirical evidence, historical evidence. This is not hatred of Muslims. This has nothing to do with Islamophobia, where I cannot be called, I am all the time, and I've always scratched my head. How can you call somebody who's looking at traditions and asking the historical questions a question that must be asked of every tradition and every scripture and every person in history? Any historical event or a person or a place needs to be investigated empirically. That is the historical test. How can you call that hatred? How can you call that phobic? Islamophobic. This has nothing to do with phobia. This has nothing to do with hatred. It is the question that must be asked. It was asked of us. We never called anybody a phobic, or had a Christophobic. That word doesn't even exist in our language. We've never at all called anybody who attacked our Lord Jesus Christ historically, or the Bible, or the New Testament, the Gospels historically. We never called them hate mongers, or people of hate. We never need to. That's why, coming back to the historical critique, you've got a neutral material that you're working with that anybody can use. That means that this is also material that everybody can employ. But the Christians are the best at it and need to be so, because they're the only ones that really give an alternative. But also, it is the one that destroys the whole foundations of Islam in one fell swoop. And we cannot be called phobic or hateful, because we're asking the right questions. I hope that helps, Kramer. I know I've gone on a little bit longer, but I thought it was important that we do unpack that, because it is foundational to what we're talking about. Great. Okay, come on board. Let's continue on, man. Let's bring these Muslims home. God bless you. This is Jathan. Over and out.